A cowboy's dog found a ranch girl dying in the dust, and destiny set the whole prairie on fire. The sun rose slowly over the wide prairie, painting the endless grasslands with shades of gold and orange. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew and wildflowers. On the edge of the ranch, a lone cowboy named Jake stood by the fence, his hat tilted slightly against the light, his eyes scanning the horizon. He was a man of quiet strength, built by years of working with the land, the cattle, and the horses. His skin was tanned from long days under the blazing sun, and his hands were calloused but steady, made for hard work and careful handling of animals. At his side, his dog Rusty wagged his tail, ears perked, always alert. Rusty was more than just a pet. He was a partner, a friend, and a guardian of the prairie. He had a keen sense of the land and could detect danger long before any human could. Jake had raised Rusty from a pup, and their bond was unbreakable. Wherever Jake went, Rusty followed, moving silently over the soft grass, sniffing the wind and always ready to act. Jake's day began as it always did, with a routine that had become second nature. First, he checked the fences along the sprawling pasture, making sure no section was broken or loose. Cattle roamed freely across the fields, their brown and black coats glinting in the morning sun. He counted them carefully, ensuring all were accounted for. Rusty ran ahead, darting between the cows, keeping an eye on the calves. Jake sometimes chuckled at how seriously Rusty took his work. The dog would nudge any wandering cow back into line, as if he understood the importance of order on the prairie. Life on the ranch was demanding but peaceful. Jake knew every hill, every creek, and every hidden dip in the land. He respected the prairie, its beauty, and its dangers. The land could be harsh, especially in the heat of summer when the grass was dry and the wind swept across the plains with unforgiving force. But it was home, and Jake would not trade it for anything. The quiet rhythm of the days, the scent of earth and animals, and the companionship of Rusty made life simple and meaningful. This particular summer had been hotter than usual. The sun scorched the earth from dawn until dusk, and the air was dry and heavy. Dust rose in tiny clouds as Jake walked, and the distant mountains seemed to shimmer in the heat. Despite the conditions, life on the ranch continued. There were always chores to be done, fences to repair, and livestock to watch over. Jake had learned to rise before the sun, to move steadily through the day, and to respect the limits of both the land and himself. One morning, as he made his way across the pasture, Rusty suddenly stopped in his tracks. His ears twitched and he crouched low to the ground, sniffing the wind. Jake noticed the change immediately. Rusty had never stopped without reason. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked softly, kneeling down to meet his dog's gaze. Rusty let out a low growl and began moving slowly toward a distant ridge. Jake's heart skipped a beat. There was something unusual here, something that made Rusty uneasy. As they followed Rusty, the landscape seemed to shift. The grass grew sparser, the ground harder and cracked from the heat. The wind blew in waves, carrying the faint scent of something troubling, something that did not belong in the calm prairie morning. Jake's pace quickened, careful but determined, as Rusty led the way with unwavering focus. He trusted Rusty's instincts. The dog had never been wrong, and Jake had learned long ago that when Rusty acted this way, something serious was happening. Meanwhile, not far from the ranch, Emily, a young woman from a neighboring family, was making her way across the prairie on horseback. She had come to help her family with the summer work, bringing her energy, skills, and love for the land. Emily was known for her courage and independence, often handling tasks that many thought too difficult for someone her age. She had a deep connection with the prairie, understanding its moods, its wildlife, and its hidden dangers. Today she had been checking the distant pastures, making sure the cattle were safe and that no animals had wandered off. Emily's horse, a strong and patient mare, moved steadily over the dry grass. She hummed quietly to herself, enjoying the calm and the wide-open sky. But as she rode further from the safety of her family's homestead, she failed to notice the hidden hazard ahead, a shallow ravine hidden by the tall, dry grass. In a moment of misstep, her horse stumbled, throwing her to the ground. Emily landed hard, the fall leaving her winded and injured. The prairie stretched endlessly around her, and for a moment she felt completely alone. Back at the ranch, Jake and Rusty were closing in. Rusty's nose led them straight toward the faint outline of a figure in the distance. As they approached, Jake's heart tightened. There, partially hidden in the dust and grass, was Emily, lying still, her horse having wandered a few feet away. He ran toward her, calling her name. Rusty barked urgently, circling her, his protective instincts on high alert. Emily groaned softly, trying to move, but the pain and exhaustion kept her pinned to the ground. Jake knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. She had a scrape on her arm and leg, and her head throbbed from the fall, but it was clear that she needed water and rest immediately. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, and the heat of the prairie could become dangerous very quickly. Jake knew he had to act fast. Carefully, he lifted Emily, supporting her weight as Rusty ran alongside them. The journey back to the ranch was tense. The sun seemed hotter, the wind harsher, and the distance longer than usual. But Jake moved steadily, his focus on getting her to safety. Rusty stayed close, alert for any sign of trouble, growling softly at shadows that might hide danger. Every step mattered. The ranch, their haven, was still some distance away, but Jake never wavered. He had done this many times before with animals, but never with a human. The stakes were higher now, and every second counted. As they walked, Emily began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open and she tried to speak, but her voice was weak. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. Jake gave her a reassuring smile, keeping his tone calm and gentle. "You're safe now. Just hold on, we'll get you back home." Rusty barked in agreement, circling protectively around them. The bond between the three, cowboy, dog, and girl, was growing stronger with every step. They were a team, united by circumstance and trust, moving together across the vast, unforgiving prairie. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. Jake set Emily down carefully near the shade of a large oak tree, giving her water and letting her rest. Rusty lay nearby, ears twitching, still alert to the sounds of the prairie. Emily looked around, taking in the ranch, the fences, the cattle, and the wide-open sky. She felt a mix of relief, gratitude, and awe. This land was harsh and demanding, yet it was full of life and resilience, the same qualities she saw in Jake and Rusty. The morning that began as calm and ordinary had turned into a moment of quiet heroism and discovery. Jake had followed his instincts, guided by the unwavering loyalty of his dog, to save a life that could have been lost to the heat and dust of the prairie. Emily, once a visitor to this land, now felt a deep connection to it, and to the people and animals who called it home. There was a sense of destiny in the air, a feeling that this meeting was no accident, that the prairie had somehow brought them together for a reason. As Emily rested under the oak tree, Jake looked out over the fields, feeling the weight of responsibility and the calm satisfaction of a life well lived on the prairie. Rusty lay at his feet, tongue lolling slightly, content but ever watchful. The three of them, cowboy, dog, and ranch girl, had faced the first challenge of the day, and though the prairie was vast and unpredictable, they knew that together they could face whatever came next. And somewhere on the horizon, the wind carried a faint scent of smoke, distant but unmistakable, a hint that life on the prairie was never entirely calm, and that destiny had more in store for them than they could yet imagine. But for now, under the warm sun and the gentle shade, there was safety, trust, and the quiet beginning of a story that would change all their lives. The smell of smoke grew stronger as the morning moved into afternoon. The wind had shifted slightly, carrying a thin, hot haze across the prairie. Jake stood near the edge of the ranch, squinting toward the horizon where the faint gray curls of smoke had begun to turn darker. Rusty stood at his side, ears forward, growling softly. His instincts had always been sharp, and now they were screaming a warning. Jake knew the prairie was beautiful, but it was also unpredictable and dangerous. One spark could set the dry grass ablaze, and a fire could spread faster than a man could run. Emily, still recovering from her fall, sat under the shade of a tree, sipping water and trying to regain her strength. She could hear the crackle of distant flames and the occasional low roar of animals moving nervously in the pasture. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Jake, how bad is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. He shook his head slightly, keeping his tone calm to reassure her. "It's moving fast, but we'll handle it. We just need to stay focused." He glanced at Rusty, who barked once, as if confirming that they were ready. Jake moved quickly, calling the neighbors and ranch hands to action. "We need water, fire breaks, and a plan to move the cattle." His voice carried over the dry grass. Men and women arrived from nearby homesteads, bringing buckets, hoses, and tools. Horses were ready to herd cattle to safer pastures. Everyone worked in a coordinated effort, guided by Jake's experience and Rusty's sharp instincts. The prairie was alive with tension and movement, the quiet of the morning replaced by purposeful activity. Emily, despite her injuries, insisted on helping. She knew the prairie and its animals, and her knowledge was valuable. "Over there," she said, pointing toward a small herd of calves that had become separated near a fence line. "They'll get scared if the fire gets closer. We need to get them to the open field near the creek." Jake nodded, impressed by her bravery and quick thinking. Together, they moved toward the calves, Emily giving instructions while Jake carried water and coordinated the movement. Rusty ran ahead, barking and guiding the animals away from danger. The fire was growing rapidly, licking at the edges of the dry grass and sending sparks high into the air. The wind pushed it toward the ranch, and Jake could see the fear in the eyes of the neighbors and ranch hands. But he remained steady, giving instructions, helping where needed, and keeping an eye on Emily and Rusty. He knew that panic would only make things worse. Calm, careful action was the key to survival on the prairie. As they worked, Emily realized just how much danger they were in. The fire wasn't just a small blaze. It was spreading across the land like a living creature, fueled by the dry grass and the strong wind. She could feel the heat on her skin even from a distance, and she watched the sparks dance in the air. But she also felt a sense of awe. The prairie was alive, wild, and powerful. It could be beautiful and terrifying all at once. And in this moment, she understood the courage and skill required to live here, to protect the land and the animals, and to survive its challenges. Rusty's role became even more important as the fire grew closer. The dog darted between the cattle, barking sharply when an animal strayed too close to danger. He nudged frightened calves back toward the safety of the creek, his movements precise and confident. Emily watched him, amazed at his instincts and bravery. She realized that Rusty wasn't just helping them survive. He was leading them, guiding them through the chaos with intelligence and loyalty. Jake coordinated the efforts, moving quickly between groups of people, making sure water lines were ready, fire breaks were dug, and animals were safe. He checked on Emily frequently, making sure she was steady and hydrated. "Stay with me," he said gently. "You're doing great. Just a little longer and we'll be safe." Emily nodded, grateful for his calm presence and guidance. Together, they became a team, working with the neighbors and Rusty to face the growing danger. The fire advanced, sending tall flames across the prairie. Smoke filled the air, making it harder to breathe. Sparks flew, landing dangerously close to dry brush. Jake grabbed a hose and began spraying water on the edges of the approaching fire, while others dug fire breaks to stop it from spreading further. Emily helped wherever she could, her knowledge of the land and the animals proving invaluable. Rusty remained at her side, alert, guiding her away from danger when necessary. Amid the chaos, Emily and Jake found a moment to communicate quietly. "I didn't expect it to be like this," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I've worked on ranches before, but I've never seen fire like this." Jake nodded, understanding her fear. "The prairie can be unforgiving," he said. "But it also teaches you to be brave, to trust your instincts, and to work together. That's how we survive." Emily looked at him, feeling a mix of admiration and gratitude. She had been alone and injured just hours before, but now, with Jake and Rusty and the neighbors working together, she felt hope. The fire pushed everyone to their limits. Men and women worked tirelessly, moving cattle, spraying water, and digging trenches to stop the flames. The heat was intense, sweat poured down their faces, and the air was thick with smoke. But there was determination in their eyes, a shared understanding that they had to protect the land, the animals, and each other. Emily felt her fear slowly turn into resolve. She had been rescued, but now she was part of the effort to save the prairie from the advancing fire. Hours passed in a tense blur. The fire spread and retreated in different patches, pushed by the wind and slowed by the efforts of the people and the dog. Rusty remained a constant presence, barking warnings, herding cattle, and comforting Emily when she grew exhausted. Jake moved tirelessly, giving orders, helping wherever needed, and keeping a watchful eye on the fire. He was a calm center in the storm, and his leadership inspired confidence in everyone around him. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the immediate threat of the fire near the main ranch buildings was contained. The flames were still present in distant fields, but the work of the day had saved the homes, livestock, and people. Exhausted but alive, Jake checked on Emily. She was covered in soot and sweat, her clothes dirty, but she was smiling faintly. "We did it," she said, her voice weak but proud. Rusty barked happily, circling them both, tail wagging, as if celebrating the success. Jake looked around at the prairie, at the blackened patches of grass and the smoke curling in the distance. The land had been scarred, but it was alive. The prairie would recover, and so would they. Emily sat beside him, resting under the shade of a tree, and they shared a quiet moment of relief and understanding. They had faced the fire together, survived its danger, and learned more about the strength, courage, and resilience that life on the prairie demanded. In that moment, Emily realized something important. The prairie was not just land. It was a teacher, a challenge, and a force that shaped everyone who lived on it. Jake and Rusty had shown her that courage, intelligence, and loyalty were just as important as strength. And she felt a bond forming between them, one built on shared experience, respect, and the knowledge that they had faced danger together and come through it stronger. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, the prairie seemed to settle into a quieter rhythm. The smoke was still visible, but it was no longer an immediate threat. The people of the ranch, along with Emily and Jake, had proven that they could face the land's challenges and work together to survive. Rusty lay down beside them, his head resting on his paws, content and alert. Emily leaned back, exhausted but relieved, and Jake watched the horizon, thinking of the work still to come tomorrow. The day had been long, full of fear, courage, and hard work, but it had also revealed the power of unity, trust, and instinct. Emily had been rescued, but she had also discovered a strength within herself. Jake had faced the fire not just to save the ranch, but to protect a life, and Rusty had guided them every step of the way. The three of them, Cowboy, Dog, and Ranch Girl, had survived the first major test of the summer, and the prairie had begun to show its respect. As night approached, a quiet sense of triumph settled over the land. The fire would continue to burn in distant fields, but for now, the ranch was safe. Emily rested, Jake prepared for the next day, and Rusty remained ever watchful. The prairie had tested them, and they had answered with courage, determination, and care. And deep in the quiet of the evening, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The prairie had more lessons to teach, more challenges to present, and perhaps more connections and destinies to reveal. The fire had pushed them to their limits, but it had also brought them closer together. Emily, Jake, and Rusty had faced danger as a team, and they had survived. And as the stars began to appear in the clear night sky above the prairie, there was a sense of calm, hope, and anticipation for what the next day would bring. They had been tested, and the prairie had answered, but so had they. Together. The night had barely faded when the prairie began to stir. Smoke still lingered in the distance, a reminder that the fire was far from gone. The wind had shifted again, carrying embers toward the dry grass near the outer fields. Jake woke early, knowing that the fire might spread further if not contained. Rusty, already alert and pacing, seemed to sense the danger. He barked sharply at the horizon, ears forward, signaling Jake that action was needed. Emily stirred beside the shade of the old oak tree, now feeling stronger after resting through the night. The events of the previous day, the fall, the scorching sun, and the fire, had left her exhausted, but her spirit was not broken. She watched Jake and Rusty, admiration in her eyes. "We have to help," she said softly. Jake nodded. "I'm glad you're feeling up to it. We'll need every hand today." Emily rose carefully, testing her limbs, feeling the aches but determined to play her part. Rusty barked and ran ahead, ready to guide them to where their help was most needed. The fire had grown during the night, spreading through patches of dry grass and threatening nearby ranches. Jake quickly assessed the situation, calling the neighbors together to plan. "We need to move the livestock again," he said, pointing toward a distant hill where several herds grazed. "We have to create wider fire breaks and keep water ready at all times. The wind is unpredictable, and we can't afford to take chances." The neighbors nodded, trusting his experience and leadership. Emily took charge of helping with the animals. She knew the prairie and understood the behavior of cattle when scared by smoke and fire. She moved calmly among them, speaking softly, guiding them towards safer areas. Rusty ran ahead, herding the calves with precision and alerting Emily to any that lagged behind. Jake watched her work, impressed not only by her knowledge but by her courage. Despite the dangers, she stayed calm, focusing on what needed to be done rather than giving in to fear. The wind shifted again, pushing the flames closer to the far side of the ranch. Sparks flew across the dry grass, landing dangerously near the fence lines. Jake grabbed a hose and began dousing the edges, while others dug fire breaks, pulling away dry vegetation to create gaps the fire could not cross. Emily joined them whenever she could, fetching water and helping move tools and buckets. Rusty's alert barks guided them, warning of sudden flare-ups and keeping everyone aware of the fire's unpredictable path. Hours passed, and the sun rose high overhead. Sweat poured down Jake's face as he worked tirelessly, constantly moving between the animals, neighbors, and fire breaks. Emily remained by his side for much of the morning, offering suggestions and guidance while helping wherever she could. She began to feel a deep connection with Jake, seeing his strength, determination, and calm in the face of danger. Rusty, meanwhile, never left their side, always ready to assist and protect. At one point, Emily noticed a small group of calves that had become separated from the main herd. They were panicked, snorting and trying to run back toward the fire. Emily ran toward them, calling softly to calm them. Rusty followed, nipping gently at their heels to guide them away from danger. Jake arrived moments later, carrying a bucket of water. Together, they guided the calves to a safer area near a creek, where the animals could rest and regain their composure. As the afternoon heat grew, the fire became more aggressive. Flames licked at the edges of distant pastures, and smoke filled the air, making it hard to see and breathe. Jake and Emily worked together seamlessly, communicating silently at times, anticipating each other's actions. They moved with precision, combining experience, instinct, and courage to protect both the ranch and the animals. Rusty remained a constant presence, circling them and barking at any sign of danger, ensuring no animal strayed too close to the fire. Despite the chaos, moments of quiet understanding passed between Jake and Emily. They shared stories of their lives, of the hardships they had faced on the prairie, and of the lessons they had learned from the land. Emily spoke of her family and how they had taught her to respect the prairie's power. Jake shared stories of growing up on the ranch, learning to read the land and surviving harsh conditions. Through their shared experiences, a bond grew, a mix of respect, admiration, and trust that neither had anticipated. As the fire crept closer, Emily realized that she had grown stronger. She had faced fear, danger, and exhaustion, yet she had found courage she didn't know she possessed. She looked at Jake, seeing the determination in his eyes, and felt grateful for his guidance and steady presence. Rusty barked, bringing her attention back to the fire, reminding her that their work was not yet done. Together, they moved to the northern edge of the ranch, where the fire threatened a small grove of trees. Jake directed the neighbors to form a human chain with buckets of water, dousing the flames as they appeared. Emily joined them, passing buckets quickly, her movements precise despite her fatigue. Rusty ran along the perimeter, warning them of sparks and moving animals away from danger. Their teamwork was seamless, the trust between them evident in every action. By late afternoon, the immediate threat to the ranch buildings was under control. The fire still burned in distant fields, but Jake, Emily, Rusty, and the neighbors had managed to protect the most important areas. They paused for a brief moment, catching their breath and assessing the damage. Emily wiped sweat from her brow, looking at the scorched grass and the smoke rising from the distance. Despite the destruction, she felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. They had faced the fire together and had succeeded in protecting the ranch and the animals. Jake approached Emily, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did well today," he said. "You stayed calm, worked hard, and helped save lives. I couldn't have done it without you." Emily smiled, feeling a mix of pride and exhaustion. "We all worked together," she said. "And Rusty, he's the real hero." Rusty barked happily, tail wagging as if acknowledging the praise. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of orange and pink, the fire finally slowed. The wind had died down slightly, and the cooler evening air helped prevent it from spreading further. The ranch was safe, the livestock accounted for, and the neighbors had begun to return to their homes, exhausted but grateful. Emily sat beside Jake under the shade of the old oak tree, watching the sky change colors and feeling a sense of calm settle over her. Rusty lay at their feet, content but alert, ever ready to respond if needed. In the quiet of the evening, Emily reflected on the events of the day. She had been injured, rescued, and then faced one of the most dangerous challenges of the prairie alongside Jake and Rusty. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had learned the importance of teamwork, quick thinking, and respect for the land. And she had discovered a bond with Jake and Rusty, a connection forged through shared danger, trust, and reliance on each other's strengths. Jake, looking over the prairie, felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had tested them, but it had also shown the resilience and strength of the community, the animals, and the land itself. Emily's bravery and intelligence had impressed him, and he felt a growing respect and admiration for her. Rusty, faithful as ever, had proven that instinct, loyalty, and courage could make a difference in even the most dangerous situations. As night fell, the prairie was quiet once more. Smoke still rose from distant fields, but the immediate danger had passed. The ranch had survived, and the people, animals, and land had endured. Emily rested under the oak tree, feeling safe and grateful. Jake sat nearby, keeping watch, while Rusty remained alert, head raised, ears listening for any sign of trouble. The bond between the three of them had grown stronger, and they understood that together, they could face whatever challenges the prairie might present. The events of the day had left their mark, both physically and emotionally. The scorched earth reminded them of the fire's power, but it also highlighted their ability to respond with courage, intelligence, and teamwork. Emily had faced danger and discovered her own strength. Jake had led with calm determination, protecting both life and land. And Rusty had been the faithful guide, protector, and friend, proving that loyalty and instinct could make the difference between disaster and survival. In the quiet of the evening, Emily looked out over the prairie, feeling a sense of awe. The land was vast, alive, and powerful. It had challenged them, tested their courage, and yet rewarded them with survival, connection, and understanding. She realized that this day would remain with her forever, a memory of danger faced, lessons learned, and bonds forged in the fire of adversity. As the stars began to appear, twinkling over the wide prairie, Emily, Jake, and Rusty knew that life on the land would continue to test them. There would be more fires, more challenges, and more dangers. But they also knew that together, they had the courage, the skills, and the trust to face whatever came next. The prairie was alive, and so were they, ready for the next chapter of a story that had already begun to shape their lives forever. The next morning broke quietly over the prairie. The sun rose in soft golden light, painting the fields in a warm glow. The air was cooler than the previous day, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the distant patches that still smoldered. Jake was already awake, walking along the fence line with Rusty at his side. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, his nose sniffing the wind. Though the fire had slowed, Jake knew the prairie was unpredictable, and he could not let his guard down. Emily stirred under the shade of the old oak tree, now feeling much stronger after a full night's rest. The events of the past days had left her exhausted, but she was alive, safe, and full of gratitude. She watched Jake and Rusty, marveling at their steady calm, their awareness of the land, and the way they seemed to understand each other without words. Emily realized that life on the prairie demanded more than courage. It demanded trust, quick thinking, and a willingness to act for others. Jake called out softly, "Emily, come with me. There's work to do before the fire spreads again." She rose carefully, dusting off her clothes, and followed him with Rusty trotting ahead. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, golden grass rolling in gentle waves. Though some areas were charred from the fire, the land was still alive, full of promise, and teeming with animals returning to the pastures. The trio, cowboy, dog, and ranch girl, moved with a sense of purpose, ready to face whatever remained. As they approached the pastures, Jake explained the plan for the day. "We need to check all the animals, make sure they're safe, and repair any damaged fences. The wind is calm now, but it could pick up at any moment." Emily nodded, appreciating his careful preparation. She joined in, moving among the cattle and horses, soothing them and guiding them to safer areas when needed. Rusty stayed close, circling the animals, barking warnings when any moved toward the charred patches. The fire had left its mark on the land. Burnt grass and scattered ashes reminded everyone of the danger they had faced, but they were also reminders of their courage and teamwork. Emily felt a deep connection to the prairie and its challenges. She had been injured, she had faced fear, but she had also discovered her own strength. Jake noticed the way she moved among the animals, calm but confident, and he admired her determination and skill. Rusty seemed proud too, wagging his tail and barking as he guided the animals. Neighbors began to arrive, offering help and sharing news of the fire. Some fields had been saved, others had suffered minor burns, but the community had come together to protect what they could. Emily worked alongside them, moving buckets of water, repairing fences, and calming frightened animals. Jake coordinated everyone's efforts, his leadership steady and clear. The prairie demanded respect, and together they showed it, proving that courage, planning, and teamwork could overcome even the fiercest challenges. During a brief moment of calm, Emily and Jake stood together, looking over the prairie. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows over the fields. Emily felt a quiet pride, knowing that she had contributed to protecting the land and its creatures. She glanced at Jake, noticing the calm determination in his eyes. "I never realized how much work it takes to protect the prairie," she said softly, "and how much courage it requires." Jake nodded. "It's not easy, but it teaches you a lot, about life, about people, and about yourself." Rusty barked suddenly, drawing their attention to a small group of calves that had wandered near a smoldering patch of grass. Emily and Jake moved quickly, guiding the animals to safety. Rusty ran ahead, circling them and barking warnings when necessary. The action reminded Emily that the prairie was still alive, still testing them, and that vigilance was always needed. Yet, she felt confident now, knowing they could handle whatever came next. As the afternoon progressed, more of the fire's remaining patches were contained. The wind remained calm, helping prevent the flames from spreading. Jake, Emily, and Rusty worked tirelessly, moving among the animals, checking fences, and ensuring that everyone and everything was safe. Emily's strength had returned fully, and she moved with precision and care, earning Jake's quiet admiration. Rusty remained vigilant, his sharp instincts guiding them through every step of the recovery process. When the immediate danger was finally under control, a sense of calm settled over the prairie. The scorched earth was still visible in some areas, but the majority of the ranch and pastures were safe. Emily leaned against the old oak tree, exhausted but smiling. Jake joined her, wiping sweat from his brow. "We did well," he said quietly. "The fire tested us, but we've survived and the land is still strong." Emily nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "We couldn't have done it without each other, and without Rusty," she added, looking at the faithful dog who barked happily in response. As evening approached, the sky turned shades of pink and orange, reflecting off the prairie's vast fields. The animals grazed peacefully, unaware of the chaos that had occurred over the past days. The neighbors returned home, tired but satisfied, sharing stories of bravery and teamwork. Emily sat beside Jake under the oak tree, watching the prairie settle into a gentle calm. Rusty lay nearby, ears twitching, alert but relaxed, ready for any sign of danger. Emily reflected on everything that had happened. She had been injured, found, and helped through one of the most dangerous challenges the prairie could offer. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. She had discovered her own strength and the importance of teamwork, planning, and trust. Most importantly, she had formed a bond with Jake and Rusty, a connection built on shared experiences, reliance, and mutual respect. Jake, too, felt a sense of calm and pride. The fire had tested everyone, but they had risen to the challenge. Emily's courage and intelligence had impressed him, and he appreciated the bond they had formed. Rusty, loyal as ever, had proven that instinct and courage could change the outcome of even the most dangerous situations. Together, the three of them had faced the fire, guided the animals to safety, and protected the land. They had survived, and in doing so, had strengthened their connection to each other and to the prairie itself. As night fell, stars began to appear, twinkling over the wide-open fields. The prairie, once threatened by flames, now glowed with the quiet resilience of life. Emily, Jake, and Rusty sat together, sharing a moment of peace and reflection. The land was alive, full of lessons and challenges, and they had faced them together. Emily realized that she was not just a visitor on the prairie anymore. She was part of its story, a participant in its ongoing life and resilience. Jake glanced at Emily and smiled faintly. "This land will always test you," he said, "but it also teaches you things you won't learn anywhere else: courage, patience, respect, and sometimes friendship." Emily returned the smile, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. Rusty barked once, as if in agreement, tail wagging. The three of them sat quietly, absorbing the beauty of the prairie at night, feeling the bond between them grow stronger with each passing moment. The fire had changed the land, but it had also changed them. Emily had discovered her inner strength. Jake had reaffirmed his leadership and calm under pressure, and Rusty had once again proved his loyalty and bravery. Together, they had survived a test that could have destroyed lives, but instead had strengthened the connections between people, animals, and land. The prairie, with all its beauty and danger, had given them a story of courage, trust, and resilience that they would carry forever. As the night deepened, Emily leaned against Jake's shoulder, feeling a quiet peace. Rusty lay at their feet, ears twitching, eyes watching, ready for any new challenge. The stars shone brightly, and the gentle wind rustled the grass, carrying the promise of a new day. They had faced the fire, survived its dangers, and learned valuable lessons about life, courage, and friendship. The prairie was alive, and so were they, ready for whatever came next. The next morning, the sun rose again over a quiet, healed prairie. The distant smoke had vanished, replaced by the warm light and gentle breeze. Emily, Jake, and Rusty stood together, surveying the land they had worked so hard to protect. The animals grazed peacefully, the fences were repaired, and the ranch stood firm. It was a moment of triumph, a testament to courage, teamwork, and trust. Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude and belonging, realizing that the prairie had changed her forever. Jake placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "We did it," he said simply. "And we'll be ready for whatever comes next." Emily smiled, looking at the faithful dog who had started it all. Rusty barked, tail wagging, as if understanding the weight of the day's events. Together, they had faced danger, survived, and emerged stronger. The prairie had tested them, but they had proven their strength, resilience, and unity. And in that quiet moment, under the wide-open sky, the cowboy, the ranch girl, and the loyal dog knew that destiny had brought them together for a reason. The fire had changed the prairie, but it had also changed them. Life on the land would continue to challenge them, but they would face it together, with courage, loyalty, and hearts full of hope.